Vonage has officially launched the Reports API, giving you a new level of access to your communication records. When you use our communication APIs, server logs and transactional records of the activity are created. The Reports API allows you to query and download this data. You can filter it based on attributes like origin and destination phone numbers, status, date range, and more. You can use the Reports API for a wide variety of use cases, such as determining what to bill your customers as a reseller by analyzing the included price data, adding the data to your business intelligence or analytics system to correlate it with other events, and more. And yes, while you can still get some of this data by logging into your Vonage API dashboard, the Reports API not only allows you to easily download this information, but also allows you to query data for up to the past 13 months. In contrast, the dashboard only shows data for the past 30 days. In this video, we're going to demo how easy it is to get up and running with the Reports API. Like our other APIs, the Reports API is also a REST API, so it can be used with your preferred language or framework, but today let's look at how to retrieve reports using PHP's Laravel. Unlike our standalone communications APIs, the Reports API requires you to already be using one of the communications APIs. After all, its purpose is to provide the behind-the-scenes data for the communications APIs. Therefore, we're going to assume that you already have a Vonage developer account and are using one of our communications APIs. If not, check out the description for a tutorial on how to get started. Now, let's start coding. First, let's create a new Laravel project. If you're using an existing Laravel project, then don't worry about this step. Otherwise, make sure that you have PHP 8 or higher and Composer installed on your machine, and then run composer create-project Laravel/Laravel, and then your project name. Here, I'm going to call my project reports-api-demo. Navigate to your routes/web.php file. There are a few different endpoints that belong to the Reports API. Some involve retrieving the reports, while the others involve actions like canceling the report retrieval or monitoring the status of the retrieval. We're going to focus on the endpoints for retrieving the reports. Right now, there are two ways you can retrieve reports: synchronously and asynchronously. Retrieving synchronously requires you to send a GET request. You'll immediately be returned batches of up to 1,000 data records at a time. This method is optimized for frequent periodic retrievals. Retrieving asynchronously requires you to send a post request, and with it, a callback URL. Instead of receiving the data records immediately in batches, your request will be processed asynchronously. When it is processed, a CSV file will be created containing all the data records for that particular search query, and the link to that file will be sent back to your callback URL. Unlike the 1,000 record batches that you'd receive synchronously, these files could hold up to tens of millions of records. Deciding to retrieve infrequent batches versus one large file really just depends on your individual use case. For instance, many of our users are finding synchronous retrieval useful for building their own dashboards or feeding their storages with real-time data. At the same time, a huge benefit of asynchronous retrieval for our users is getting data for all sub-accounts in one report. Setting up the route for synchronous retrieval is fairly straightforward. We need to set up a GET route that will then send a GET request to the Reports API. Let's create a GET endpoint called sync. The first thing you'll want to do is add your API key and secret from the Vonage API dashboard. Normally, you would add these credentials to your .env file to keep them hidden, but for the sake of simplicity for this example, I'm showing them hard-coded here. Next, we'll want to add some other data we'll need for the request. Things like the Vonage URL we need to send the request to, as well as the date range we want to query. Some other query params we'll want to add are the product, which specifies which particular API we're inquiring about, the direction, and most importantly, the account ID. In the last few lines, we'll now create a GET request to the URL using our query params as well as our API key and secret. As a response, you'll see something like this. That's how easy it is to get started with synchronous retrievals. Asynchronous retrieval has a little bit longer of a setup, but can definitely be worth the effort for your needs. For async, we need to set up two routes. The first one is a route to send the post request that tells the Reports API to process your retrieval attempt asynchronously. The second one is a route where the Reports API will send the link to your data records after it's done processing. Let's actually start with the second route first. This will be our callback URL. Let's create a new post route with the endpoint incoming. If the processing was successful, the callback response will look something like this. Specifically, you'll see a download report field in the response. Hitting the URL with a GET request will download the zip file which contains a CSV of all the data records you queried for. Keep in mind that the file is only available to download for the first 72 hours, so you'll need to download it fairly quickly. How you store and process this data is completely up to your business needs. But for this example route, we'll just print the URL to the report. Now we'll create our route that requests the async retrieval. Let's create a new GET route with an endpoint called async. Minus a few tweaks, the endpoint will look very similar to the sync endpoint. After all, we can query the same records with both methods. The difference is only in how those records are received. Let's copy and paste all the credentials and params from the sync endpoint. We can now also add our callback URL as a param. One major difference between the sync and async endpoint is the URL. The async URL doesn't include the /records path segment. And the last major difference that we've already spoken about is that the async request is sent as a post request instead of a GET. So let's change our HTTP call here as well. Now you're ready to go. When you make a post request to this async route, Vonage will process your request and send the final report to your incoming route when it's ready. If you're running this locally, note that while your outgoing routes like sync and async will send the request despite your code being privately hosted, to receive the callback from Vonage to your incoming route, that route will need to be publicly hosted. There are a few platforms that you can use to tunnel your localhost to a public URL, but one of the most straightforward platforms to do that is ngrok. And there you have it. You can now start analyzing your communications data. To stay up to date on the Reports API, as well as Vonage's many other APIs, subscribe to this YouTube channel, join our Slack community, and check out our blog at developer.vonage.com.